I was working with the son, an 11-year-old boy, whose parents were divorcing. And a colleague of mine in the clinic was working with the mom. And I was very much for the son having contact with both his father and his mother. My colleague was very much for the client having contact with his mother and very little with his father.
Oh, wow.
So it got very interesting.
Yeah.
So constellation work might have been really helpful in clarifying
Yeah,
for
right.
both me and my colleague.
Right. So one of the things constellation work does really well in organizations, for example, when you have a case where you have a consulting organization, and as you just described, one of you is working with the child and the other is working with the divorcing parent. And of course those are really different perspectives. And when you're in an individual counseling setting, part of your job requirement really is to support your individual client. But then you end up in the same clinic with people with supporting those really different views. And having a facilitator come in and set up not just the family, but the relationships of the counselors with the family often brings a lot of clarity to a situation and can help you as the agency form coalitions and find ways of explaining things to your clients that are inclusive, that are systemic, that take all the different perspectives into account. One of the things constellation work does really well is it incorporate, it's like circular questioning, you know, on the floor, because it does allow us to incorporate different perspectives without having to choose one over the other.
That would have been very helpful.
Yeah.
I would have enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that would be really great, yeah. And I think that's, you know, that's also true inside an organization. It's because different departments have different perspectives on resources, and there's a lot of, you know, competing demands inside an organization for what do we do, who's right, what perspective is right. And the constellation can actually allow all of these voices to be heard together without putting it in a frame of competition, but putting it in a larger frame is what is it that we, as a system, as an organism, what is it that we know? And how do we incorporate these together to find the best solution, which oftentimes is really surprising. You know, it's often something like you don't expect that somebody needs to go interview the father, or so, you know, there's like a voice that hasn't been heard, or there's something that's being excluded, or you know, it's like what is the mother's fear if she allows her son to be with the father, and how do we address that? Hellinger also has a different perspective. He says the child in a divorce is best with the partner who is most able to look at that child and say, I love your mother and you. Who is able to look at that child and feel warmth for the other parent as they see that in the child. Otherwise, the child's forced to choose. And, you know, you can't actually split yourself in half very well. And I think that's the pain for children of going through divorce.
Yeah.
Is how can I be half wrong and half right, and now the other half is wrong and the other half is, you know, depending on who I'm with. So it's yeah, and that happens in organizations too.
Sure.
Yeah, one of my goals, I think, in life is to help us learn to cooperate. And it's so, constellation work is so beautiful because it really incorporates a systemic perspective. It allows us to actually embody a systemic perspective, to actually experience different points of view. For example, if you're doing mat work where you have colored mats that are arranged on the floor based on how people feel the relationships stand in space, you can have people stand on different mats. I saw Matthias Vargas van Kibberd do a really fun piece of work where he had a few members of an organization and he set up chairs, and I've done this too, and you have people sit in different chairs and say, okay, now we really need to hear from the marketing department. Would you just go and say, what do they say? And the act, it's very different to think about it from your chair and think about what they always say. Whereas if you actually have to get up, leave your position, literally, and go and sit in their position and try and speak from their perspective to the system, it's a really different experience. And very often we learn things on an experiential level that we cognitively don't get until we do it. So I think that's one of the really nice things about this approach. It's kind of a full body, full in kind of experiential way of knowing.